probably a couple times before he applied for the position that was open at the Falls. And like I am, he is also a graduate of the Falls, went through the photo program. I went through part of the program and then also through the graphic design program. And at that time was working for PBS. And Ira came to us and he even, did all the work there and passed all the tests. And anyway, so he joined us and he's been real active out there. I think it was 23 years, you said, Ira?
It's been 23 years.
I can't believe it's that. Yeah, I was there about 33 and I think I might have been the longest, person there. I don't know how long exactly. Bill Campbell came in 63, but I don't remember when he retired. But anyway, it was really good enjoying you with that. And we both did a lot of curriculum revision through the years there. And anyway, so I really enjoyed having you there and enjoyed your taking over some of that responsibility. So anyway, without further ado, Ira.
Well, thanks for having me, everyone. It's nice to see so many familiar faces, the Bashirs and Steve Shining, and the only person in this screen that's known me longer than Roger would be John Lepper. I've known John since I was in high school, so we're aging well. Before we begin, I just have a couple of quick comments about critiquing. And one of the things that's always challenging about critiquing is the person doing the critiquing either tends to tell you how they would do it versus in a more formal critique one-on-one, we'd have more time to be able to explore what it is you were trying to do and be able to try to figure out whether that was working or whether or not there was some other strategy that would get closer to communicating what you're trying to communicate. So in this format where it's a blind critique and I'm scoring, I just want to caution to only take the critique for what you're paying for it, which is nothing, because I'm going to do my best to try to share a variety of approaches. You may agree with me, you may not agree with me, but it's just understanding the limitations of the format and what we're doing. I will tell you that my overarching principle and my approach to photography is to recognize that every image is an attempt to translate an emotion into a graphic representation. That there was something that caught your eye, something that struck your soul, your heart, guided your attention and said, I got to pick up my camera, because it's a pain in the butt to pick up a camera in some circumstances. It can feel very intimidating to pull up a camera in a particular scene. So for me to pick up my camera means that I had to be moved on an emotional level. Now, the challenge is, how do I translate that emotion into a visual image that transmits that emotion to the viewer? And so that's going to be what I'm kind of emphasizing when it comes to particularly composition and impact is, do I think this is translating a particular viewpoint, an emotional, an aha? And we'll talk more about that when we get to the actual subject of the month, because I'm really excited about that subject. So with that said, and knowing that I talk a lot, we need to move fast. And I'm going to close so I can just see this. So here's our first image in the general category.
Ira, before you start, I'm going to mute everybody. And so you'll need to unmute yourself.
Oh, okay.
Maybe I.
Let's see. How do I? Yeah.
Okay. Ira?
You might like it if I was muted. Go ahead. Is that Dennis?
Ira, is that Ira, what category is that?
Okay, Ira, you need to unmute yourself now.
I was told to start with color in general.
All right, is that? It's supposed to be in alphabetical order?
All I have is access to what's been shared with me.
Okay. So
If you have a better way of presenting it, for example, this particular image is not anonymous because there's a watermark or copyright on the bottom right.
okay,
Pardon me
click-
for interrupting.
click on the, if you don't mind, click on the name again so that you can resort. There you go. So that
Okay.
will be the first one, Apex
Okay.
Predator.
All right.
Okay, good.
We're good to go?
I think so. Have you maximized your screen?
How's that?
Okay, just checking. Okay, so just so you know, this is kind of how we go. So you're gonna make your comments and critiques, and then after that you mention your 3 scores, and after your 3rd score, the technical category, then I'm going to announce the total,
Okay.
total score, and then the photographer.
Okay.
And then, so that's my cue. When you say once you're done with the 3 scores, that will be my cue. And then when I'm done, then that'll be your cue to move on to the next image.
All right. Sounds
Okay.
good.
All right.
Well, so when we talk about images with impact, one of the things that always creates impact is the sense of the exotic. And so I tend to think of exotic images as low-hanging fruit usually, except for I think this one is done exceptionally well. And the reason I say the low-hanging fruit part is that if I lived somewhere where tigers were native, I might not think of it as exotic, right? But here we have mountain lions, but we don't have tigers. But this is a very high impact image. What I'm most impressed with is a couple of things in terms of composition. I really like the fact that there's something in the foreground that's giving me a depth clue that is putting that subject in the environment instead of in front of the environment. So you've got this nice framing device. I'm also very impressed with the catch lights in the eye. Very beautiful catch lights. That's a timing and waiting for the subject to be in the right spot. I don't know if this was taken with flash on a game preserve or not, but it's just really beautiful lighting. I'm not going to worry about it. The only thing that I would consider is trying to evaluate whether the best choice was made in whether or not formatting it horizontally, vertically, or square, because we have the eye, the things are a little off center, so it's a little out of balance to me. If we wanted to go by gaze, if that tiger was turned a little bit more looking out to the right of the frame, then we might want to put this eye in the middle of the frame and leave it a little more sightline in a horizontal. I do find myself thinking that if it were me, I would probably come in a little bit tighter for a little bit more impact. Dear colleague and friend of mine, Colin Mulvaney, talks about circling the magic, and the magic is the mask of the face, the detail in the face. So that would be the only thing I would think about, is possibly playing with the composition, the framing of it a little bit. So with that in mind, and again, the only thing I can tell you about judging is I'll try to be consistent. My scores might be consistent on the low end, it might be consistently on the high end. I don't know what you're accustomed to. I'm going to give that a 3 for composition. I'm going to give it a 5 for impact, and I'm going to give it a 3 for technique.
Apex Predator by Harvey Brown, 11 points. Okay, this one is Black Collared Hawk. Go ahead,
So,
Ira.
we have a profile of a hawk in flight. It's a recognizable bird image that's really showing some expression of the beak being open, which we can presume to hear a call. One of the things I try to do when making a photograph is I try to pay attention to how can I show the various senses, not just what I see, but what do I hear, what do I smell, what do I touch. And so from that standpoint, we're getting the sense of sound. We're also getting a sense of touch with the texture on the feathers. So I think it's a nice image. The thing that's missing for me is a relationship of, it's a very close identification photo. And I feel like I want to see when that hawk is in relation either with a prey, with another bird, coming close to the nest, something on there. That said, I do find myself thinking that we could focus on the speed of the hawk with this image a little bit. And so I do, again, we have a blank sky as part of the challenge there as well. It's a very clean image. It's a very, I'm a bird watcher myself, so I really appreciate the clarity of this image. But it's overall, it's a fairly simplistic composition is what I would say on that. And so to be consistent, I'm going to give a 2 on composition. I'm going to give a 4 on impact, and I'm going to go 2 on the technique, just because, and I don't know if it's a limitation of the lens or what, but it just feels like it's a little bit of a blur. I'm not sure whether we could have gone a little faster shutter speed on that to kind of freeze that a little bit further.
Black Colored Hawk by Rosemary BCR, 8 points.
And I've put myself in the hole, people. I know my scores are going to be artificially low, but in order to be consistent and relative, I apologize for that. I blew it on the first image, so I'm just going to stay in the same scale for fairness.
Busy Beaver.
So what grabs my attention is the fact that you're seeing the paws or the claws grabbing the stick. That's really fun. I like the fact that it's got a kind of a U-shaped composition with the way the greenery and the water patterns are just kind of encircling. So compositionally, it's got a nice flow to it. I do think that I would probably come in just a little bit tighter on this, because now it's making it a little more energy for me. Although I do respect that they're thinking about this foreground element here, but you can see that I think just getting in a little bit tighter. I think it's got pretty strong impact just because of that sense of reaching for something. And again, it translates for me the memory of learning to swim and doing the paddle kicking from the side of the pool. And we think beavers are just natural swimmers, and I'm sure they are, but as a human being looking at this beaver, I'm reminded of childhood memories of trying to learn to swim. I think on the technique, I feel like this image is a little overexposed, particularly in this area over here. I even think that we could probably bring this down a third of a stop on color and texture in there. So I'm going to give this I'm going to give it a 3 for composition. I'm going to give it a 4 for impact and a 2 for technique.
Busy Beaver by Steve Whitaker, 9 points. Challenge.
Beautiful, graceful lines in this image. Really, what grabs my eye is the relationship that's being portrayed in this area right here. It's really quite lovely. I do find myself thinking an 8:10 proportion would just bring that in a little bit, would add a little more formal structure, kind of play on a little bit of a symmetry, a little bit of a pyramid with just kind of the arching gesture, but definitely has a beautiful sense of relationship, and it creates that connection with, it's kind of like when you watch the Coca-Cola polar bear commercials, it humanizes that emotion a little bit. Very, very strong image that way. Composition 3, impact 5, and technique 4.
Challenge by Rosemary BCR, 12 points.
Beautiful. Oh, I'm supposed to stop staring at that one and move on. Sorry.
Encased.
I love these kinds of detail shots in nature because it just triggers the imagination. I mean, I could picture this being the toes of a frog. I also just get the sense of cold and the juxtaposition of the greens, which we associate with life, with the ice, which we associate with cold winter death. I love the kind of the reverse S movement from top to bottom within the frame. The color saturation is beautiful in here. I think it's a lovely, lovely image. The only thing that I would suggest for improvement would be to eliminate the white vignette and replace it with a darkening vignette that just would pull my eye into this area here. I feel like we're fading to white on the corners, and I just find myself wanting to just deepen my connection with this area of the image here. I'm going to give that a 4 for composition. I'm going to give it a 4 for impact and a 3 for technique.
Encased by Lori Carlton Smith, 11 points.
Wow, there's a familiar name I haven't seen or heard in a long time. Hi, Lori.
Going nowhere.
Love this subject matter. I can't help but I love Americana. I love rust and decay, and I love new life that takes over it. I do find myself immediately being drawn to the juxtaposition that is in this image, and that juxtaposition is not up here, it's down here. And so I find myself wanting to instantly crop this horizontally. I don't know if you can see that or not, but basically that really is where the magic is, because you've got this repetition of circles, and you've got the repetition of the pattern of the horizontals, and you've got the juxtaposition of the new life against the old rusted metal. And so to me, that's where the image is. This is pulling my eye away from the magic. This is absolutely magical. And I think the challenge when photographing is sometimes we leave too much in, and we've got multiple images within the frame, because I could also just as easily focus on another detail area up here. But I think you can see that this is where the magic is where the green is going against the rust. So I'm going to give that a 3 for composition. I'm going to give it a, that's really tough. I'm going to give it a 3 for impact. And I think the color correction, everything in the technique is really strong. I'll give that a 4 for technique.
Going nowhere by Rosemary BCR, 10 points. Jumping over the rope.
When I saw this, I immediately was thinking about Edward Muybridge's motion studies to determine whether a horse has all 4 hooves off the ground during motion. And I thought about how magical the fact that it looks like all 4 hooves are off the ground and it's trying to keep from landing in that loop of the rope. There's a complete story. You've got 3 dominant elements with a couple of background elements that are blurred out. This is a really well executed action photo. I think it's exceptional in many ways. The only thing I would consider playing with would maybe dehaze it just a little bit to bring out a little bit more richness in the colors. It feels a little low in saturation, just it's like a tiny skosh. But I think it's an exceptional image. Timing's everything, and it tells a story. And again, what I want to applaud is the fact that you have this interval. This line is not merging with this body. In any moment, that horse would have converged with that line on that fencing. Same over here. And so just to capture that magic, I think that's just extremely well done. I'm actually going to give that a 5 for composition. I'm going to give it a 5 for impact, and I'm going to give it a 4 for technique.
Jumping Over the Rope by Dennis Isip, 14 points.
Nice work.
Thank you. Man and His Pipe.
One cannot look at this image without conjuring awareness of the important work around the world that Steve McCurry has done in his career. Most memorable would be the portrait of the Afghan girl that was featured on National Geographic cover. There is just something so profound about looking and staring at another human being face to face with the simple symmetry of the eyes and the nose and the gesture and the cultural artifacts of a pipe and the hand. It's just a mesmerizing image. I think that it could be cropped ever so slightly tighter. And I'm trying to keep an 8:10 proportion because it just strengthens, it's a little more formal. And I think that composition would just be a little bit richer. I'd probably bring a little bit of vignette. And again, this is me telling you what I would do, my apologies. But I really love the gesture, the diagonal, the texture around the eyes. This is a good example of why with documentary work, we celebrate texture as opposed to in commercial glamour photography, we try to smooth and hide texture. This really is rich. Composition, I'm going to give it a 4. Impact, I'm going to give it a 4. And technique, I'm going to also give it a 4.
Man and His Pipe by Barbara Murray, 12 points.
Should have known. Hi, Barbara.
On we go.
So this is a very difficult to critique this image simply because it feels like digital art. Feels very painterly. I'm not sure what the original physical object in space was, but it's very enchanting. It feels like I'm looking at stained glass window in a church that is being like I'm being drawn into heaven. That I just got this really, it's got Celtic rings and just the greens and the reds. It's very, very interesting. I think of it as abstract. This is just, I think there's a separate category for digital art. That said, I'm going to say composition, it's really well done. I'm going to give it a 4. Impact, I'm going to give it a 4. The only thing is, I will tell you, the color choice of red and green, those are equal in intensity. If you were to turn that into a grayscale image, you would have no contrast because red and green are one of the 3 primary colors. So I would try to play with the color harmony just a little bit more. And I'm going to say technique 3.
On We Go by Gene Alleman, 11 points. Princess.
Okay, wait till I show you my grandson who just got born 3 weeks ago. No. How do you not just absolutely love these sorts of little angel moments? Again, I just want to get in tighter. I want to give that baby a kiss on the cheek. And so I just want to come in so tight in there. And then the only other thing I would do is I'd probably try to open that skin tone up just a little bit, brighten it up just a little bit. Here's in a case where the white vignette works. It has a very nostalgic feel, but I'd take it a little bit further by lightening it up to where the whole thing starts to feel like a pastel drawing. And there I go, making digital art out of it, but just lighten it up just a little bit. And the other thing is I would probably lighten it up just to be able to keep that dark shadow. That's a baby that's too young to have stress of the world and bags under the eyes from lack of sleep. So I would just kind of open that up just a little bit. Composition 3, impact 3, and technique 3.
Princess by Dennis Esip, 9 points. Red-billed blue magpie.
Well, I'm a bird fan, and this feels like one of those energetic, high energy compositions because of, if you were to draw an X and Y axis where each of these claws are holding on to the tree trunk, you would see a diagonal angle there. And then you see this beautiful sweeping line of the tail feather that is somewhat mirroring the sweeping line of the little bit of branch with these green leaves in here. Very, very beautiful. And then you've got the bokeh, the out of focus background that's really separating out. You've got rich saturated colors with the orange, the blues, and the greens. It's a high impact image. The challenging thing is you do have a contour merger with this one little branch here. If that were my garden, I'd probably cut that little branch off, but then the bird would be gone. So just picking hairs there, but just a beautiful sweeping image. I'm going to give it a 4 for composition, 5 for impact, and a 4 for technique.
Red-billed blue magpie by Harvey Brown, 13 points.
Nice job, Harvey. Oh, I'm supposed to move on. Sorry, I was staring at it.
San Francisco skyline.
One of my very favorite places in the whole wide world. Love it, just love it. And I'm going to assume that this is maybe some stars poking through here, which would really add to the energy going on. I also get a sense of a little bit of a vertical, I don't know if you can see it over Zoom, but there's a little sense of a vertical here. There is some great radial banding happening on this image. You're running into the limits of what the camera was able to do in this lighting condition. You are getting a little bit of banding going on here that kind of makes me think of solar waves though, or just kind of adds to that energy going on here. That said, I feel like this is a very compressed, flat image because there's nothing in the foreground. It's really, I almost would have put this in the subject of the month category of if there was a little more sky in there, then it'd be that kind of relationship, skyline, sky, that sort of thing. It's a fairly horizontal, straight up and down image, very formal composition. My critique, the challenge is it's an exercise in technique. It's not so much a storytelling part. And I'm looking for where that story element would be. And for me, that story element that seems the most interesting might be over in here, because it looks like there's maybe a crane, that there's going to be something added to that skyline. And so my attention would be guided over here. And I find myself wanting to make a vertical image over in this area here to accentuate the height, the tallness, and the story of engineering and building that. Color harmony is beautiful. The blues and the oranges, it's very, very nice. I'm going to give it a 3 for composition. I'm going to give it a 3 for impact, and I'm going to give it a 4 for technique.
San Francisco Skyline by Don Burnell, 10 points.
Great to hear your name, Don.
Shooting Upward.
My wife and I were just up at Priest Lake, staying at Hills, and not doing anything other than burning lots of firewood. And I really, really love what's happening in here. There's the magic. Might come down just right in here. And so this is where I start saying a photograph is made 4 times. Once in our mind's eye, once in the camera, a 3rd time in post-production where we have an opportunity to recompose it and reevaluate it again, and then finally the 4th time when it's presented to an audience to view. And so in this case, I really think the magic is right in here. And you knew, I think your technique is great to get the embers, the sparks, and the time exposure. I think that's brilliant. And so I just think the composition could be tightened up a little bit. I'm going to give it a 3 for composition. I'm going to give it a 4 for impact, and I'm going to give it a 4 for technique, because I do think that time exposure and getting that painterly quality is excellent. I just think it needed cropping.
Shooting Upward by Gene Alleman, 11 points.
This would be one I'd try using the dehaze on to increase the contrast up in this area here. That'd be a fun thing to play with.
Soldiers.
So this brings up an interesting aspect of photography, in that the meaning of a photograph is never fixed. It's never set. The maker makes an image. They have a particular symbolic meaning that they're going for, but then society and culture evolves and changes, and it will change the meaning. This photo will mean something different 10 years from now than it does right now. Right now, it stands out because of the fact that, well, first of all, the artist has used a technique to colorize part of it. And so this looks like a Civil War reenactment, but it's also very dynamic. Well, let me just talk about formal composition. The lines, the diagonal lines, the triangles that are created, the triangles are created, and then the stripes that also create triangles, the belts. Very well composed image, very powerfully well composed. The impact is high, not only because of the technique of having color versus monochrome, but also because of the times we live in, the polarized politics, the reevaluating of the Civil War, and the fact that we also are looking at gender. Looks like male and female in here, so that is a little bit of a surprise in terms of not expecting a female in this particular era of military action. And so this image is going to take on a whole different meaning. Society is going to do with it what they will. And so very, very well executed by the maker. I think I'm going to give it a 5 for composition. I'm going to give it a 5 for impact, and I'm going to give it a 5 for technique.
Soldiers by Beverly Hardin, 15 points.
Okay, what's going on here? Oh, there we go.
Study in Browns.
I'm just going to make sure I didn't accidentally pass one. Yeah, okay, good. There we go. Sorry, could you restate the title?
Study in Browns.
Study in Brown. Okay. I thought I heard you say Sunny in Brown, because that would have been good too, because you've got this circle and you've got this sense of a solar wind happening here. I'm in a solar wind theme, but it's also got an eye going on here. And this reminds me of a minor white image of charred wood that looked like an ocean wave. Beautiful image. So I think the maker really was drawn to the circle and the sense of movement that was happening in this frame. I think it needs to have a little bit more work done in terms of maybe the time of day for getting just even a little bit more texture in the lighting, or maybe just even a shaft of light across it would really enhance it a little bit more. It still has an overall flat feeling. I feel like I'm being confronted straight on to it a little bit. And I find myself thinking I could probably pull just a little bit more out of it with clarity and dehaze. This center area feels like it feels like this could be a limitation of your lens that's prohibiting you from getting as tack sharp an image as you would like, because frankly, this outer area looks sharper than the inner area, and that could be a problem with the ability of the lens to focus that close. That the outer distance might be able to stay in focus, in the center. I don't know. I mean, I have to talk to an optician about this, but basically this feels a little blurry in the middle and sharper out on the edges. That said, I'm going to give it a 2 for composition. I'm going to give it a 3 for impact and a 3 for technique.
Study in Browns by Gene Alleman, 8 points. Then our last entry for digital color is Upper Terrace and Beyond.
So the first thing that strikes me about this image, and just a quick review of design elements, we have line, shape, form, texture, pattern, color, space, movement. And so really I'm struck by the color harmony of the warm tones in the foreground. Warm tones project, the cool tones in the background. I'm struck with a sense of three-dimensional form and texture, as well as these lines in here. It's a very nice formal composition of a very interesting subject matter, because you get the sense of warmth and like hot pools with snow in the background. So you've got that juxtaposition happening there. I do find myself wanting this to be a little more dominant in the frame, because I do think that that communicates the sort of Mars-like atmosphere of how hard it is to thrive and live here. You know, you don't see humans' footprints in this space in here. And so I do find myself wondering about shifting over. I think of Galen Rao's work where he just talked about move your feet instead of zooming. But that said, I mean, that's picking something. Just to me, being able to get this over in the 1/3 area over here just a little bit more. And I find myself thinking this bunch of trees over here I don't really need, because I could just come in and just tighten that up a little bit. I love playing with your work. And I just think that's a rich, rich image. Very well done overall. It's exquisite. I'm going to give that a 4 for composition, give it a 4 for impact, and a 4 for technique.
Upper Terrace and Beyond by Steve Shining, 12 points. Okay, so next you probably want to get out of that to get to the next folder. Yep.
Let's see, general monochrome.
General monochrome.
Oh, good. I'm going to make up for talking too much by having fewer images. I guess one advantage of Zoom is with everybody muted, we don't hear all the groans and frustrations. I'm sorry. Okay.
The middle child always suffers.
I love that title, and I love the way the maker was aware of the symbolic quality that is possible when photographing things. Minor White says we photograph things for what they are and what else they are, and the symbolic representation of this middle and being surrounded, and to see that as a relationship is just fantastic. I also think it's got kind of an infrared feel to it with the tone range of it, which is very delicate. I wish I could zoom in. This is where if we had more time, we'd go into Photoshop and zoom in one to one. But it just has a beautiful texture to it. There's a softness and a harshness simultaneously. The harshness caused by the deep blacks, the softness caused by the fractal patterns of the texture of the subject, and then there's this beautiful little lines here, beautiful lines here that aren't overlapping, so they're just very delicate. I think it's an exquisite image. I'm going to give that a 5 for composition, 4 for impact, and a 5 for technique.
5, 4, 5. The Middle Child Always Suffers by Terry Hamilton, 14 points.
In that case, the middle score suffered compared to the other two, right? Yeah.
Looking Down the Leaf.
So I must admit my own bias in favor of fractal patterns of nature, and just how, again, I look at this and I not only see a leaf, but I see a bird feather, and that we recognize similarities and we see something for what else it is. And again, I think the maker of this did a beautiful job with the tone scale, the tone mapping, to get these delicate highlights, rich midtones. I think the vignetting might be just a skosh heavy on this. I'd like to see it backed off just slightly. That's personal preference. And then I find myself wondering if we could leave just a little bit more room on the edges. I like this idea of a Chinese scroll art vertical 10 by 20 proportion is what I typically do, because I can get prints that size. And so I just love the feeling that this is evoking. I'm going to give this a 4 for composition. I'm going to give it a 4 for impact, and I'm going to give it a 4 for technique.
Looking Down the Leaf by Don Burnell, 12 points.
Beautiful.
Just Plain Old.
Many years ago, there was an artist that did an exhibit of sculptures of old barns that really accentuated these empty spots. And the title of the exhibit was Equilibrium. And the idea is that the barn withstands the weather, and there's a battle happening with weather until it reaches that equilibrium to where the wind can pass through, and yet the barn still stands. And you just see these gaps in here, and that's where the magic of this image is. It also reminds me of a Walker Evans approach, in that it's really emphasizing the flatness, two-dimensional, straight on. We're not really seeing a lot of the sides of this barn, and it accentuates a sense of flatness going on here. Whereas here we see a little bit more depth clues with the side of there as well. I think, if this was a traditional film image, this looks like an orange filter could have been used to really bring out the sky. I suspect it's digital, and that the blue channel's been brought down. And when you bring it down and accentuate it, you start to get a noise that kind of reminisces of film grain, which has a nice feel to it as well. I like just a little bit, because it just is feeling like the shadows are a little crushed, to where I just want a little more tooth or a little more grit to this wood to go with the oldness. But overall it's a beautiful image. It's got a lot of interesting things going on. I like the long horizontal proportion that the maker has chosen on this. I'm going to give this a 4 for composition. I'm going to give it a 5 for impact and a 4 for technique.
Just Plain Old by Don Burnell, 13 points. Admit One.
So fabulous subject matter. I mean, when's the last time you got a ticket for 35 cents? In American theater, 35 cents, very interesting. It even shows you the Washington tax of 4 cents. That's lovely. It's got a nice color handling to give it a nostalgic, warm tone to it. However, the elephant in the room is that the magic would have been to have included the whole oval or circular photo, because I like the fact that it's out of focus and the emphasis is here, but I'm looking for the show bill of that promotion of why would I pay my 35 cents for admission to get into the show. And I feel like this is, reminding me of Roy Rogers, and I want to go listen to, the songs of the Sons of the Pioneer. Beautiful image overall. I love the boldness of the close composition. I just want to see it opened up, maybe be a vertical to get that background in there, but I don't know what the scene was to work on it, but it's got a lot of things going for it. I'm going to give it a 3 for composition, give it a 4 for impact, and I'm going to give it a 4 for technique. Very nice job with the tones.
Admit One by Tamara McGee, 11 points. Okay, so at this part of the evening, that was our last entry for the general categories. We're about halfway through the entries. Do we want to take a break? Ira, you need a break?
I'll leave it up to the audience.
Okay,
No.
Keep going.
keep going. All right. Let's go ahead then and move on to
Okay, so we're going to go to the subject of the subject of the month, and we're going to be talking about the subject was sky, correct?
Correct.
All right. So I would like you to what's the word I'm looking for? Humor me by letting me share just a couple quick comments before we go into this section of our show. First of all, I want to share with you, and this is the teacher in me, I want to share with you why I think sky photography is such a great subject, why it's so important. When we look at abstract sky images, we often experience what's known as a non-symbolic experience, meaning it's the only time in our life where we, you may have heard yourself, looking at a sunset going, oh my God. And you are feeling something that's ineffable. You're feeling something that cannot be put into words. And during that brief moment of being speechless, that aha moment, we actually experience a contentment and a happiness that is often missing in our lives. And I think this is really important during this period of COVID, that we recognize that we have the ability to look at the sky and go, oh my God, I can't put it into words, but I can make art and I can photograph it. And so what's great about these is how they translate emotions that are beyond words and yet can evoke powerful emotional responses. And when we look at the history of photography, photography is deemed as art, deemed a science and not an art. And it was Alfred Stieglitz's studies of clouds that he called equivalence, where he was able to demonstrate beyond a shadow of a doubt that a photograph could evoke emotion, and that each distinct moment in time, each image is a subtly different emotion, totally different feeling. And as you look at these images, you can do your own little biofeedback and feel your heart rate either get faster or slower, depending upon the soothing quality of it. And so that leads me to thinking about the Hudson River painters and this idea of sublime beauty. and that with the sky and the relationship of the land and the sky, we experience that wonder. And what is particularly magical in North America is the fact that we still have wilderness. And so when we see work like Max Reeves' photography, I don't know if you're familiar with his work. You see the relationship of that aha moment with landscape, is his particular relationship with it. So that in mind, you have picked a subject matter that is near and dear to my heart because of its a way it can be so evocative in a non-verbal manner. Okay, where are we going here? There it is. Okay, so we'll start with subject color.
Subject color. All right, our first entry for this category is being polluted.
Okay, so what's interesting about this is when we use captions or titles, we're adding to the communication. And so this maker is stating a particular viewpoint about the environment and potentially about climate change. And so I think it's important that we recognize what is we're trying to say with this image, and then we apply technique to get at the best expression of that. And so to me, the expression of that, trying to keep it within the subject area, I'm probably going to bring this in a little bit more. And I'm probably going to use the dehaze in Camera Raw, the dehaze setting, to beef up a little bit more separation of tones, a little more intense contrast. So if we go back to Stieglitz, you see the really deep tones, because this is a dramatic force that's happening here. And then you've got this sky. And so you're like, a photograph is often like taking a moment out of a sequence in a story, telling the middle of the story, and the viewer has to put the ending in it. And so we know that this is going to go up into the atmosphere because the photographer has emphasized the sky in this and the horizon in this line. So I think we could just kind of strengthen that impact a little bit more through framing and some of the other techniques. So I'm going to give this one a 3 for composition, I'm going to give it a 2 for impact and a 3 for technique.
Being polluted by Sister Madonna, 8 points.
Yay, Madonna. I'm so happy to hear your name, sister. It's been so long.
Catching the light.
Photographer did a great job of telling a story. And really, this is the artist's story of capturing light, and photography is all about light. I do find myself wanting to make this into a panorama so that I could really make the reflection really symmetrical, to really play on symmetry for that. Beautiful color harmony. So I'm going to give that a 3 for composition, 5 for impact, and a 4 for technique.
Catching the Light by Donna Larson, 12 points.
Great work, Donna.
Circumhorizon Arc.
That's God's breath, right? Coming across there with a little bit of a color rainbow on there. My challenge is the blown out highlights over here, and my challenge is this border merger here. I want to widen it out. If we're going to keep that in there, I want to see it in relationship, because it's almost like this is building its mass from being blown blown from right to left in the frame here. Like it's like capturing all this. It's a very interesting dramatic image. I think it could be taken a little bit further with the technique portion of it. I'm going to give it a 3 for composition. I'm going to give it a 3 for impact, and I'm going to give it a 2 for technique.
Circumhorizon Arc by Beverly Hardin, 8 points.
Yeah, that's one you want to underexpose and bring it out back in post-production.
Full Sunset.
I'd like to applaud the maker of this image because it looks like they may have actually pulled off to the side of the road instead of running into somebody, because they're so, like, I would just be, oh my God, and drive off the road. So I applaud the safety that I see here in this image. At least I think I'm seeing safety. That's a magical moment, and the maker took the time to make the image, and I applaud that. I think they did a nice job of really bringing that horizon line low. Again, I think the challenge with sunsets, particularly with digital, film actually handles sunsets better than digital because of the clipping part of it. I wonder if we could pull that down a little bit more and then open it up, and you can have almost nothing in your shadows and still be able to pull those out in post-production, but it's really hard to pull anything in the brightest hot spots. There's kind of a weird sense. This feels like a cell phone photo, and apologize if it's not, but it has that little bit of that pixelization, and I have no judgment. I take photos with my cell phone every day, including most wonderful sunset photos. This is an image that needs to be made big and really let it go soft in the sky. If you want to just get that aha moment, this has that Hudson River Valley quality to it. I'm going to give this a 5 for composition, 5 for impact, and a 3 for technique.
Full Sunset by Steve Whitaker, 13 points.
Okay.
It was a cell phone.
I nailed it. All right. I would take out this one little highlight down here. I'd burn that in just to keep your eye from going off to that little spot. Other than that, it's great.
Cumulus Reflection.
Okay, so fantastic subject matter, fantastic location. It is a juxtaposition of an oasis-like feeling because you see palm trees in the background, you see this brown edge of here, you see houses here, and then you see this beautiful blue and the sky and water that really creates an exotic juxtaposition. My problem with it is I can see the whole cloud here. I can't see it here. I have a border merger. And the way we can get around that is to shoot this as a vertical panorama and stitch it together in post-production so that I can keep that, because this would just be absolutely sensational as a truly symmetrical vertical panorama across the scene. And I would probably go ahead and make the palm trees, and I'm hearing Jackson Browne sing Peaceful, Easy Feeling as I do this, but I would probably make it, the other thing you do is just recompose this to make it more intentional with the border merge on the bottom of the cloud as well as on the top of the frame. But see how moving those palm trees in the middle strengthens the story of this image. Okay, I'm going to give that a 3 for composition. I'm going to give it a 4 for impact and a 3 for technique.
Cumulus Reflection by Donald Larson, 10 points. Dusk Drama.
Cool. Woody Allen said 80% of success is being there and showing up and being there. And Galen Rowell talks about this too. The best time to go photograph is not on a bright, clear, sunny day, but it's just before a storm or just after a storm. Real quick, I think the only thing I would do is I'd probably strengthen this composition by making it more of an 8x10 composition. and really strengthen that lower right third where that rainbow is, and really emphasize the upper left of the cloud, because that's the relationship there that is really magical. And then what happens is this little blue patch becomes the only tunnel. It's the blue is taking me out of the frame, but if I crop in, I'll do that one more time real quick. If I crop in right in here, I'm actually keeping the eye, and there's just really one pathway out, and it's through that rainbow area. So I think that would be the suggestion I have for this image. What's really interesting too is I think the color is accurate, because you see a true neutral in the cloud, you see blue, but this is this really yellow, like there's just so much particulate in these clouds and sky that is really dramatic color harmony with the blues and the yellows. I'm going to give that a 3 for composition. I'm going to give it a 5 for impact and a 4 for technique.
Dusk Drama by Lori Carlton Smith, 12 points. Jackson Square.
High impact. It does remind me of Disneyland a little bit. You have this little sparkle of sunburst coming in here. Pretty magical image. I have a little bit of an issue with feeling like there's a little hot spot on the edge where you've got a curb that's curving, and there might have been water on the ground, creating a little bit of reflection of the fence. Find myself wondering if we could have backed up a little bit and played with that reflection a little bit. I don't know. I wasn't there. It's got really poppy saturated color. And I do think it probably is about 1/3 of a stop too bright. I think we could pull a little more richness in these highlight values in here just a little bit, and maybe even pull in a little bit more in the sky. It's a symmetrical composition with just the flagpole throwing it off just a little bit, and then the statue being off just a little bit. But overall, it's really solid, stable composition. Might have moved and lined up this center with that clock if I just moved to the left just ever so slightly. And so I'll give this a 3 for composition, a 4 for impact, and a 3 for technique.
Jackson Square by Tamara McGee, 10 points. Late One Evening.
So I find myself really loving the storytelling part of this. There's light inside of here, but I don't see any figures, and yet there's no draping hiding them. So I'm kind of half expecting to see people dancing in there, but they're not. I like the horizon line placement. I love the sky that's been executed there. I do find myself feeling like this is overly bright because I really want to focus on the sky. And it's, to me, what's kind of interesting is this idea that we've got our lights on so bright that we can't even see the stars. We're in our own world. And I think that might be a subconscious expression of how we felt being in quarantine. And so I think the magic is out here, and I think there's a little bit of competition visually for what's dominating our attention. I would love to see that toned down and maybe made into a more of an amber color, so that the whites would be in the sky, and this would be toned into more of this color down here, which is the human light pollution, if you will, in this sky here. But overall, beautiful image. I'm going to give it a 4 for composition. I'm going to give it a 5 for impact, and 4 for, well, who am I kidding? I'll give it a 5 for technique. I mean, that sky is pretty amazing.
Late One Evening by Tim Lesser, 14 points. Milky Way Panorama.
Spectacular sky, spectacular job of pulling all this out and making a rainbow feeling out of the night sky. That's incredible. I wish, I mean, I almost would just burn that to black so I don't even pay attention to it, because that being so close to that edge is just pulling the eye out of the frame. You know, it's just so challenging. I just find myself wondering if we got rid of it and just really emphasize the night rainbow effect. Could be really something. I'm going to give that a 4 for composition, 5 for impact. Well, I'm going to give it a 3 for composition, 5 for impact, and a 5 for technique.
Milky Way Panorama by Harvey Brown, 13 points. Sky Reflected.
So this is one I would play with the composition a little bit, trying to move. So my first thought was, would this make a better vertical to really show the leading line of the water on the ground leading to the bunch of trees up to the sky? That could be a nice image. But then I'm like, oh, but there's this cool human element over here. And so then I start thinking about, well, how can I break this frame up into the golden mean 3/5 proportion, a little Cartier-Bresson action going on here. And maybe I could go ahead and bring that in about here so that the trees are kind of a third of the way, 3/5 of the way in from the frame. And I can just kind of see that as being a painting from the south of France, where Van Gogh and some of the other painters were doing a lot of work. It has a strange color cast in that it's just a softening effect going on. Almost has like a color infrared feel to it. I don't think it is, but it just has that feeling to it, because there's just a softness here, and it's just kind of a color that I'm not accustomed seeing in the landscape. I tend to see more of a straw yellow color. This has more of a orange, sun-kissed orange color to it, which is accentuating the blue maybe, but it just feels a little bit unnatural to me, but I could be wrong. Most men are partially colorblind, but it's really a beautiful eye for this. I'm going to give it a 4 for composition, 4 for impact, and I'm going to give it a 4 for technique, because I'm going to say that it looks intentional, the softness.
Sky Reflected by John Lepper, 12 points.
Nice.
Spring Skies and Meadows.
What was the title again?
Spring Skies and
Okay,
Meadows.
Spring Skies and Meadows. This one's tough for me. I'll just be honest with you, because so often when we pick up our camera and point at the subject, we haven't fully clarified what the subject is. And what I mean by that is this snow-capped peak is grabbing my attention and pulling it away from all this greenery. And so it's really the green steps leading up to the mountains, leading up to the sky. And it makes me think of Mongolia, or you know, the steppe grasslands where I'd expect wild horses, that sort of thing. And so I just found myself wondering whether or not there was a great image to be had as more of a vertical that focused on this, what appears like a trail or a road cut through this area here. And I'd like to see more of that in the foreground to lead me into that. This also has that Lord of the Rings adventure feel to it. or I find myself wanting to be a little bit more over in this area and see the relationship between the sky that gives us the snow, that gives us the water, that then comes down to the lowlands to give us the green, which will turn into brown in a short while. So to me, I find myself wanting to know which story this maker wanted to tell. And I don't really know, because I feel like it's split in half right down the middle here. This is all over here, this is all over here, and I'm stuck knowing where to go. So I'm going to give that a 3 for composition, a 3 for impact, and a 4 for technique.
Spring Skies and Meadows by Steve Shining, 10 points. Starburst Maneuver.
Since the story of Icarus, man has wanted to fly. And this is a dramatic image. And I think what is so magical about it, not only do you have a radial balance going on here, but you have one dominant focal point that's getting sunlight on it to where you see the bright red, white, and blue, particularly the white and the blue portion of it, compared to seeing the shadow side of each of these other aircraft. And so that's a really nice moment that this photographer has captured. I really can't say much more about it other than it's exhilarating. I'll give it a I'm gonna give it a 4 for composition, 5 for impact, and 5 for technique.
Starburst Maneuver by Rosemary Bissiar, 14 points. Starry Night.
Sense of aloneness here with a solitary vertical tree in the middle of the frame. Beautiful gradation of blues to deep blues to black with the stars. It's a beautiful image. I do find myself wondering about it when we've got such a strong vertical in here. I do find myself wondering if a 8x10 proportion, 16x20 proportion, whether that would just strengthen that just a little bit. That's a, either way, I kind of half expect to see the 3 wise men on silhouettes of camels coming into view. It's just got that Christmas magical quality to it. You've seen in our cultural references of Christmas. It's beautiful. I'm going to give it a this is tough because I do find myself, my eyes wandering out of the frame. I'm going to give it a 3 for composition. I'm going to give it a 5 for impact, 4 for technique.
Starry Night by Tim Lesser, 12 points. Storm Clouds.
Powerful image. And again, I'm trying to figure out where the story is. I'm actually okay. I kind of wanted to see the peak of this old barn, but I kind of like just the idea of looking beyond ahead. But when I frame this image like this, those telephone poles start reminding me of crucifixes, and storms tend to be times when people want to pray that they get through it. And so to me, to strengthen the story, I find myself wanting to come in just a little bit tighter to really emphasize that faith quality of getting through a challenging moment like this. But overall, I think it's really well done. Maybe a little skosh hot there at that very top, but it's well done overall. Give it a 4 for composition. I'll give it a 4 for impact and a 4 for technique.
Storm Clouds by Lori Pence, 12 points. Sunset at Moose Ridge Ranch.
I want to go. This image is begging to be composed in the same proportion as the gateway, just because it would allow me to really want to enter that gateway instead of sneak in from the side. And then I do find myself wondering if we could contain that cloud within that gateway by moving off to the right. I don't know, it's probably too big. So just things I would ask myself. But it's very inviting image. I give it a 3 for composition. I give it a 3 for impact and a 3 for technique.
Sunset at Moose Ridge Ranch by Terry Hamilton, 9 points. And our final entry in subject color, Sunset Vortex.
You see me play a lot with recomposing, and the reason I tend to do that is I'm playing with where the line is. Basically, what's dynamic about this is these converging lines, implied lines that are creating a focus of energy in that composition, and how can I heighten the experience of the viewer to feel that? I think the title used the word vortex. There's a powerful quality to that, and we respond to it since the days of telling stories of Mount Olympus and the heavens and the gods. And so very, very powerful image in that respect. In terms of technique, I feel like you could squeeze more out of this image. I don't think it's given you everything it has to give. I'd play with the dehaze, I'd play with the clarity, I'd even play with texture to really, really bring every ounce out of that image that you can to emphasize the drama that's there. I'm going to give that a 3 for composition, a 4 for impact, and a 3 for technique.
Sunset Vortex by Barbara Murray, 10 points. Subject monochrome. There you go. And our first entry is activity in the air.
So this image, the maker needs to make a choice what they're photographing. And this is a very strong vertical line, very strong upward moving diagonal line. This is clearly what caught the maker's attention, but this over here is pulling my eye away. It's heavy, it's dark, and it's big, and the subject matter is light. And so I would just make it about the relationship of this happening above the treetop. That would emphasize height a little bit more in this image. And I think that there's more that could be squeezed out of that image. I think you could have underexposed a little bit further and then pulled out a little bit more of the smoke part of it. I'm going to give that a 2 for composition, a 3 for impact, and a 3 for technique.
Activity in the Air by Sister Madonna, 8 points. Cirrus.
I didn't hear the title. What's that?
It's cirrus.
Oh, okay. Cirrus is
cirrus cloud.
Cirrus cloud, right? Okay. This has this infrared quality to it that is one of the things I love about infrared is it reveals to us what we can't see with the naked eye. And I think it just causes us to pause for self-reflection, like we've entered into a dreamland. I find this foreground element to be a beautiful, look at that beautiful curve in the trunk, beautiful texture, and look how it's light against the darker tones in the background. And I find myself wanting to make a stronger relationship between this element and these clouds, because you look at that, the maker saw this and you didn't see it consciously, but you saw it with your whole body subconsciously, and saw that movement with that little gesture happening in the sky as well as in the foreground. And so I'd like to back up just a little bit further to, and maybe move slightly to the right, to be able to show that relationship, the harmony between the clouds and this particular small tree in the foreground with this beautiful meadow in between. There's so much wonderful things happening there that we can be working with. I'm going to give that a 3 for composition, 3 for impact, and a 3 for technique.
Cirrus by Harvey Brown, 9 points. Follow the clouds.
My butt hurts because I feel like I'm riding on a covered wagon, and I don't think they came with cushioned seats. This has that sense of dryness and ruggedness and unknown future. I mean, I just can't even imagine coming across the Oregon Trail, what that would have been like. And this is a pretty well established road compared to that. I just get in tighter. Robert Capa said, if your photos aren't good enough, you're not close enough. And oftentimes, and I go back to what Colin Mulvaney says, circle the magic. The magic is this relationship of the road, the trees, the clouds, and the wispy clouds above, and just kind of tightening that up. This is a little loose, it's a little wide, and that's where the proportion of an image affects the tension or the structure of the feeling that you get. And so I just find myself like, it takes a lot of strength of character to move down that road to an uncertain future. I'm going to give that a 3 for composition, 3 for impact, and 4 for technique.
There, Follow the Clouds by Lori Pence, 10 points. Night Burst.
So that's a Moses talking to God experience happening, it feels like. I mean, that's this like powerful symbolic voice of the heavens. It's just shocking, almost, you know, it's that sublime beauty, sublime being that the idea that it makes you aware of your own mortality. It's so frighteningly beautiful. I do see, it does strike me as a cell phone photo. I see a lot of banding, vertical banding going on over here. And I think that could be cleaned up a little bit, because you could let that area go darker. And I would just maybe even, I mean, really it's, don't know that I'd do much with composition. I just think I would try to tone down and tighten up the banding on this particular image, but it's definitely a 5. Well, let me get composition. I'm going to give it a 3, impact 5, and technique 2.
Night Burst by Sister Madonna, 10 points.
Nice. I get what you're doing, Sister Madonna. It's really nice.
And our last entry for tonight is Palouse Sky.
So this image has been crafted by somebody with a lot of experience. It's really got area here. It's got beautiful tones in this area here. The only thing is this one tree. I either want to have a little more room to the side. It's just squeezed in there a little tight to where, and yet I see why we kept it, because you need this cloud to keep this enclosed. This is really the magic of this, is this sense of enclosure that's happening. And I find myself going, I wonder if we could have made that panorama to go slightly wider and recompose. Quite often I will shoot a panorama and then crop it to an 8x10, but now I can choose exactly where I want, or I'll crop it to a 10x20, any number of things. That panorama gets me out of a lot of jams, because this is where the magic is this kind of juxtaposition of this dark enclosed area with this light enclosed area. So this is dark enclosed by lighter, this is light enclosed by darker. And again, I want to see just maybe that a little bit more of the enclosure. We couldn't just widen this out just ever so slightly more. But like I said, there's some craftsmanship put into this, because it's been interpreted into a monochromatic warm tone image that is conveying emotion through color. And we do get these rich tones in the foreground. So very nicely done. I'm going to give it a 4 for composition. I'm going to give it a 5 for impact, and I'm going to give it a 4 for technique.
Blue Sky by John Lepper, 13 points. That's it for the evening. Hey, Ira, I do have a question.
Yep.
I like it when you started the evening by explaining the intent of the photographer, and hope, and that you wish that you knew so that you could critique it better.
Yeah.
I guess my question is, what do you think of using the title to give a hint of that?
I personally think titles are important. It is one of the tools the maker has to guide the viewer into their intentionality. And so let me share my screen again for a moment, and I'll show you an image. Okay, it is, Roger, help me out. He shoots 8x10 photos. Oh gosh. 10,
aspect ratios.
bus bench, photo, one died. There's a very famous photographer. Oh gosh. He shoots 8x10 American prospects photo. Joel Sternfeld, thank you. Okay, I answered my question. Joe Sternfeld, and I'll make this bus bench. It should come up. This image right here. So this image, and let me open it up by itself. This image, it's a formal composition. The two vehicles are framed within the enclosed glass, or plexiglass bus shelter, another car outside of it. Lots of formal squares, etc. But it's a rather banal image. It wouldn't score high for impact if you didn't know that the caption tells a story about this is the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and a woman died sleeping in this bus shelter who had been denied benefits from across the street the day before. So the caption adds information that transmits the story in that particular image. Now, titles shouldn't do that particularly, but they can help. And so I do think, when possible, if you've got a meaningful title, give it to it. I know a lot of artists will just leave it as untitled. And if you want it to be abstract or ambiguous, and you don't want to inform, you just want them to react, then you can leave it untitled. But I think having a title helps clarify what you're trying to translate for us.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I'm open for questions. And again, the scoring part is so foreign to me because every image is its own thing. So forgive me if I just don't feel very confident on the scoring part, but I feel very good talking about your image if you want to talk about it.
Ira, you were trying to show us some crops of the images.
Yeah.
But it wasn't coming through. I don't think any of us actually saw it, and I don't know what the technical.
Oh, okay. So let's take a look at those. Let me pull those up. Give me just a moment. Thank you. I wasn't sure if you could see where my screen was graying out a little bit.
I could see just the bare outline of where your crop tool was.
All right. So let me just open with preview. Did a lot of cropping. Okay, let me share. So there's the tiger. There's the aha God moment. There's so there's just.
Okay. Yeah, it would have been nice to have, for us to see that, but I don't know how we would have
Yeah.
done it in real time.
So there's one potential crop there. There's another potential crop there. And there I cropped out that little bright spot to really emphasize the rainbow of the Milky Way. And there I decided if you're going to crop the top in one, you might as well crop it on the bottom as well and move the palm trees into the center of the frame a little bit more to really emphasize that story.
Right, that opening credits for the Tim's, English broadcast.
Which English broadcast?
The Thames River thing. Anyway, it's just a standard opening for the BBC, I think.
Oh, yeah. So just making that symmetrical, I think strengthened that up a little bit. It really tightened it up the composition, and just trying to get the impact. And so here was, Steve's shot. I just found myself wanting to pay more attention to that tree by bringing it in a little bit tighter. And to me, that maker had magic going on right there. I think they could squeeze more out of that image by playing with the dehaze setting in Camera Raw and doing more. I think that could be a whole series of abstracts.
Oh yeah, wow.
Just brought that in a little bit tighter. And so there is, I don't think as strong an image, but there is an image that I think is just really strong. The way that's wrapping around that wheel, the way that's coming out of that front, and that circle that emulates the So that was the cropping I did.
Oh, very nice.
Yes, very impressive. It's amazing.
Thanks also for throwing in a little of the art history and, references to famous photographers. That's something we almost never hear from anybody. And that's nice, to kind of give us some references. And I wrote down a couple names to look up. So thanks.
Oh, you're so welcome. Do you have a moment? I'll share an image I made today. if you're interested. Let's see here. See if I can get it to come up.
Do you have any baby pictures of your grandson?
I will share those too if you're interested.
That's-
So I was giving a demo today on surrealism, and I put this image together as part of a demo today. And those are moth photos taken with my cell phone.
How many images?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 images.
Wow.
Oh, 8 if you include 2 textures images of just scratched brass and an image of concrete that I just layer in for texture.
Very nice.
Thank you.
Yeah, I like that.
What background were the moths on when you took those?
They were against a window in Montana, and I overexposed the background. You know, I photographed from the inside window and overexposed so I could see light through the wings. And so it just was essentially a white background. And Photoshop has just gotten so easy to select and mask elements that it just changes how you work. I was teaching the students that you may not have the perfect scene, but you might have elements for the perfect scene. So photograph the elements and put them in your library and you'll do something with them later.
Great.
And I literally put this together in an hour. You know, I got up this morning like, okay, I gotta give a demo on surrealism. What am I gonna do? And I just thought, well, I remember these moths in Montana, and I just started playing with them. And then this is just the foreground is actually a image from Priest Lake that was in fog, the inlet, and I just doubled it and flipped it horizontally to create go all the way across. So I kept my symmetry. And then there's the grandbaby.
Adorable.
That's cute.
What's his name?
His name's Riker.
Oh, good. That's nice.
Yeah, yeah. And it was my son's birthday yesterday morning, so I went to have coffee with him, and I got to have Riker and coffee. I think we look like in the cheeks.
Excellent. Thank you, Ira.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
And thank you for doing this tonight. We learned a lot.
My pleasure. It's so great to see so many familiar names and faces. Really, it's like coming back to a family.
That's great.
Thank you, Ira.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks,
Good
Ira.
Night.
Have a great night.
Thanks very much.
Let me make a quick announcement.
Oh.
Education night next week. Tim Lesser will be doing some things with layers and Photoshop and showing us how to use those very effectively. Okay? So I'll be sending out a reminder. Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.